The leather of my favorite armchair sighed as I settled deeper, the weight of 82 years pressing down heavier than usual tonight. Outside, the sprawling grounds of Briarwood Manor were swallowed by a velvet darkness that matched the bitterness curdling in my gut. Scotch, neat, burned a familiar path down my throat. Not for pleasure tonight, for fortification, because tomorrow, I, Brian Eldridge, was going to light the fuse on a carefully constructed bomb disguised as a tragedy. You live long enough, you see the patterns. The way money paints over cracks, then becomes the crack itself. I built this fortune shipping, then tech investments, a lifetime of ruthless pragmatism laced with a surprising dash of luck. It bought me Briarwood, the cars, the security, the deference. It also bought me isolation, a gilded cage where the birdsong was often replaced by the calculated chirping of relatives waiting for the old buzzard to finally croak. Sarah, my daughter, once she was the light of my life. Now, calls were scheduled, brief, efficient. Updates on the kids I rarely saw, perfunctory inquiries about my health that never probed deeper than the weather. Her husband, Robert, a walking spreadsheet in a Savile Row suit. His handshake was always a fraction too firm, his eyes always darting around the room, calculating the value of the art, the furniture, me. Then there was Marcus, my nephew, ambitious, charming like a snake oil salesman. Always had a surefire investment opportunity that conveniently required my capital. His wife, Cynthia, could spot a designer label at 50 paces, but genuine emotion that seemed beyond her comprehension. Their visits were like market research trips. And David, my son, the biggest disappointment, chose a life chasing waves and cheap thrills on the other side of the country. Calls were rare, usually precipitated by a financial hole he'd dug himself into. Just a temporary loan, Dad. Tide me over. The tide never seemed to turn. His indifference wasn't malicious, just profound. Like I was an inconvenient ATM he occasionally had to visit. Only Eleanor, my late wife's sister, ever felt real. But she was frail now, tucked away in a quiet cottage on the estate grounds, content with her books and garden. Bless her. She never asked for a thing. The catalyst was Marcus' last visit, 2 weeks ago. Head breezed in, smelling of expensive cologne and desperation. Uncle Brian, you're looking well. The pause before well was infinitesimal but loaded. Listen, I've got this incredible AI startup, pre-EPO, ground floor. It's going to revolutionize logistics. Exactly your old wheelhouse. Just a modest injection, say 2 million. We can structure it against the eventual inheritance. Simplify things later, you know. Head leaned forward, eyes gleaming with avarice disguised as enthusiasm. Think of the legacy. Legacy. The word echoed in the cavernous study after he left, smelling faintly of betrayal. That's when the seed took root. What was my legacy? Funding Marcus' probable folly, bailing out David's perpetual adolescence, funding Robert's next luxury car, leaving it all to Sarah, who treated me like a mildly inconvenient administrative task. No, I needed to know. Before the dirt hit the coffin lid, I needed to see their true faces, stripped bare of the dollar signs that clouded their vision whenever they looked at me. I needed to know if anyone, gave a solitary damn about Brian Eldridge, the man, not the bank account. So, I planned, with the cold, meticulous precision that built my empire. Dr. Aris Thorne, my physician for 30 years, owed me more than a few favors. Discretion was paramount. A hefty donation to a research wing he championed smoothed the ethical wrinkles. The diagnosis: glioblastoma multiforme, aggressive, terminal, 6 months, maybe less. The prognosis documents looked terrifyingly real. Scans were creatively altered. Thorne rehearsed his lines, the somber tone, the regretful delivery, the lack of viable treatment options beyond palliative care. The bomb was armed. The detonation was a carefully orchestrated family meeting. No emails, no texts. Summonses delivered by my long-suffering, utterly discreet assistant, Martha. Mr. Eldridge requests your presence at Briarwood, 4 p.m. It is urgent. The vagueness was deliberate, Let them speculate. Let the vultures circle the possibility of carrion. They arrived within minutes of each other. A convoy of expensive German engineering crunching on the gravel drive. Sarah, Robert, their twin teenage boys looking bored and glued to their phones. Marcus and Cynthia, Marcus practically vibrating with nervous energy. David, surprisingly, flew in. The urgent summons must have implied immediate financial gain. Even Eleanor was gently helped in by Martha, her kind, watery eyes full of unspoken concern. I received them in the grand, oak-paneled library. It deliberately chosen a wingback chair near the cold fireplace, not my usual commanding position behind the desk. I wanted to look diminished, vulnerable. I wore clothes slightly too big. I hadn't shaved that morning. A subtle application of pale makeup courtesy of Martha's discreet artistry completed the picture of a man under siege. Silence hung thick and heavy as they settled. Robert cleared his throat. Marcus fidgeted. David stared out the window at the perfectly manicured lawn he probably saw as his future liquid asset. Sarah finally spoke, her voice tight with apprehension she likely mistook for concern. "Dad," Martha said. It was urgent. "Are you all right?" I took a deliberately shaky breath, looked down at my hands, twisting them slightly. Let the silence stretch, build the dread. When I looked up, I made sure my gaze swept slowly over each of them, lingering just long enough to see the flickers of apprehension, confusion, and yes, that glint of morbid curiosity. "No, Sarah," I said, my voice deliberately roughened, weaker than usual. "No, I'm not all right." I paused, swallowed hard, as if gathering courage. "Doctor Thorne, he called me in yesterday. Ran some tests, extensive tests." Another pause, heavy with implication. I saw Cynthia lean forward slightly, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows raised. Marcus stopped fidgeting, frozen. David turned from the window, a frown creasing his sun-weathered face. Robert's expression was unreadable, but his knuckles were white where he gripped the arm of his chair. "It's bad," I whispered, letting the word hang. He called it glioblastoma, a brain tumor. "Aggressive." I choked slightly on the next words. "Terminal. 6 months. Maybe less." The explosion wasn't loud, but it was seismic. Sarah gasped, a hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with genuine shock. "Oh God, Dad, no." For a second, a fleeting, beautiful second, I saw pure, unadulterated daughterly fear and grief. It pierced the armor he'd built. Then, almost visibly, the shutters came down. The practical administrator took over. "But treatments, options, there must be something." Sloan Kettering, Johns Hopkins. "We'll get second opinions, third opinions." Her voice was rising, frantic, but the franticness felt directed towards fixing the problem, not absorbing the horror for me. Robert placed a hand on her arm. "Sarah, calm down. Let your father speak." His voice was steady, lawyer smooth. "Brian, this is devastating news. Truly, Doctor. Thorne is certain. The prognosis is definitive." His eyes were sharp, assessing, looking for loopholes, angles, not looking at me. Marcus was out of his chair, pacing. "Terminal. That can't be right. Uncle Brian, you're a fighter. We'll beat this. Money is no object. Experimental treatments, Switzerland. That clinic in Germany I read about." His fervor was palpable, but his eyes, they darted to the Titian hanging above the fireplace, then to the rare first editions lining the shelves. Calculating, always calculating. His fight wasn't for me, it was against the potential loss of his golden goose. Cynthia nodded vigorously beside him, murmuring platitudes about positive thinking, her gaze equally acquisitive. David just stared. His face had paled beneath his tan. He ran a hand through his messy hair. 6 months, he echoed, his voice hollow. "Jesus, Dad." He looked genuinely stricken, but it was the stricken look of a man who'd just been told his trust fund was evaporating. Not that his father was dying. There was no move to come closer, no offer of comfort, just stunned disbelief aimed at his own disrupted future. Eleanor, bless her, simply started to cry. Silent tears traced paths down her wrinkled cheeks. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her grief was quiet, profound, and utterly for me. Martha, standing discreetly near the door, looked down, her lips pressed tightly together. I knew her heart was breaking for the performance, for the real pain she knew he'd soon witness, and for the genuine sorrow she felt at the idea of my loss. The room dissolved into a cacophony of reactions, all revealing more than their words ever could. Sarah and Robert huddled, talking in urgent, low tones, logistical planning already underway. Marcus bombarded me with frantic questions about symptoms, doctors, research, each question subtly probing the timeline, the accessibility of funds. Cynthia fluttered around offering to organize things, her idea of organization likely involving redecorating the manor to her taste. David sank back into a chair, staring at the Persian rug, if it held the answers to his suddenly uncertain financial future. Only Eleanor remained a silent island of sorrow, and Martha a pillar of stoic support. The performance had begun, and I, the dying patriarch, had the best seat in the house to watch the grotesque ballet of greed and feigned concern unfold. The bitterness in my gut intensified, but beneath it, a cold, hard resolve solidified. Let them dance, let them scheme, let them reveal themselves. The terminal test was underway, and the failing grade would carry a price none of them could imagine. The days that followed were a masterclass in human nature under the shadow of perceived mortality. Briarwood, usually a haven of quiet isolation, became a stage for a relentless, often nauseating, parade of familial care. Sarah descended first, the dutiful daughter incarnate. She arrived the next morning with a suitcase, announcing she was moving in for the duration. Her energy was terrifyingly efficient. She commandeered the East Wing guest suite, had her assistant faxing medical research papers to Dr. Thorne, who played his part with Oscar-worthy stoicism, and began streamlining the household. This involved interrogating Mrs. Higgins, my cook of 40 years, about sodium content, and rearranging the pantry with the zeal of a general preparing for siege. Her concern manifested as control. Every conversation circled back to the disease, the prognosis, the practicalities. "Dad, we need to discuss power of attorney," she said over a breakfast. She'd insisted on preparing a flavorless gruel she deemed nutrient-dense. "Robert can draft the documents. We need to ensure everything is handled smoothly." When she couldn't bring herself to say it, but the implication hung thick in the air, heavier than the scent of the weak tea she'd poured. "And the will, we should review it. Make sure it reflects current circumstances." Her eyes avoided mine, fixed on her tablet, where she was likely already drafting a list of current circumstances, namely, ensuring her family's primacy. Robert, the strategist, appeared later that day. He brought expensive, utterly useless wellness gifts, crystal-infused water bottles, a bizarre magnetic bracelet purported to align cellular energy. He steered clear of overt emotional displays. His approach was legalistic, cloaked in concern. He spent hours in the study with me, ostensibly keeping me company, but subtly probing my understanding of my assets, the structure of the trusts, the liquidity of certain holdings. He spoke of tax efficiencies and protecting the estate from probate complexities, his voice a soothing murmur that couldn't quite mask the underlying avarice. "Brian," he said one afternoon, leaning forward confidentially, his expensive cologne suddenly cloying, "given the situation, it might be prudent to consider accelerating certain transfers, gifting allowances, perhaps, to Sarah and the boys, minimize the eventual tax burden. You understand, it's purely for the benefit of the family legacy." The family legacy again. It always came back to the money. I played the confused, weary old man, letting him talk, storing every carefully phrased suggestion, every veiled directive. Then came Marcus. His brand of care was suffocating enthusiasm. He arrived almost daily, bursting with breakthroughs, had read about online dubious clinics in Mexico offering miracle stem cell treatments, radical diets involving nothing but kale and sunlight, a psychic healer in Sedona who specialized in terminal cases. He presented each with the fervor of a televangelist, his eyes alight not with hope for my recovery, but with the desperate need to keep the money tap flowing. "Uncle Brian, this clinic in Zurich, They're using gene therapy. Revolutionary. Initial consultation is only 200 grand. Pocket change. We can have you booked in next week. Head thrust brochures printed on glossy paper under my nose. Think of it. A second chance. We can't just roll over and accept this. His we was telling. My potential survival was intrinsically linked to his financial survival. When I demurred, citing Dr. Thorne's advice for comfort care, his face would fall, replaced by a frustrated petulance that barely concealed his panic. He'd then shift tactics, circling back to his damned AI startup. Well, even if you're not up for the fight, uncle, this investment, it's a sure thing. Locking in now. Before the diagnosis, before it's public, would secure the future. Your legacy, living on. The sheer, galling opportunism took my breath away. Cynthia accompanied Marcus sometimes, a silent, impeccably dressed shadow. Her contributions were limited to vapid observations about how brave I was being, punctuated by not-so-subtle hints about furniture or art she admired. This Chippendale desk is simply exquisite, Brian. Such craftsmanship. It would look stunning in Marcus's new office, when he finally gets the space he deserves for his ventures. Her smile was brittle, her eyes like chips of ice assessing the room's inventory. David was a ghost. He stayed in the gatehouse cottage, emerging mostly for meals he picked at in silence. He looked lost, adrift. When he did speak to me, it was stilted, awkward. "How are you holding up, Dad?" Head mumble, eyes fixed on the middle distance. There was no offer of help, no shared memories, no attempt at genuine connection. Just a palpable sense of inconvenience, of a future head taken for granted suddenly crumbling. He asked for money once, a week in, a mumbled request about boat repairs that were clearly a cover for deeper debts. The timing was so spectacularly bad, so utterly revealing of his self-absorption, that I almost laughed. I refused, feigning weakness and confusion about finances. He just nodded, a flash of resentment in his eyes before he slouched away. The contrast was jarring, painful. Their performances were exhausting, a constant barrage of false concern masking naked self-interest. I felt like an exhibit in a particularly ghoulish museum, except for two people. Eleanor, my dear sister-in-law. She didn't bombard me. She didn't offer cures or ask about money. She simply was there. She'd come in quietly every afternoon, settling into the armchair or as it mine, with her knitting or a book. Sometimes we talked gentle reminiscences about Evelyn, my late wife, about happier times, silly family stories that had nothing to do with balance sheets. Sometimes we sat in comfortable silence, listening to the grandfather clock tick away the moments. She'd bring me little things, a flower from her garden, a warm scone Mrs. Higgins had baked defying Sarah's dietary edicts, a new mystery novel she thought I might like. Her presence wasn't loud, but it was solid, warm, and undeniably real. Her tears that first day hadn't been for show. They were a genuine wellspring of sorrow for the brother-in-law she loved, facing an end she believed was real. Her quiet dignity was a balm on the raw wound their avarice kept reopening. And Martha, my rock, my co-conspirator in this grim charade, she witnessed it all: Sarah's controlling frenzy, Robert's legalistic probing, Marcus' frantic sales pitches, David's sullen absence, Cynthia's acquisitive glances, and Eleanor's quiet devotion. She managed the household with her usual impeccable efficiency, shielding me from the worst of their intrusions with polite but firm gatekeeping. Mr. Eldridge's resting became her most frequent, gently delivered rebuff. She brought my meals, often smuggling in the actually edible versions Sarah tried to ban, handled the fake medical correspondence with Dr. Thorne, and maintained an outward composure of professional sympathy. But in the rare moments we were alone, I saw the anger simmering in her eyes, the disgust at their behavior. She never spoke ill of them, her loyalty absolute, but her silent solidarity, her unwavering presence in the eye of this hypocritical storm, meant more than all their hollow performances combined. One incident crystallized the grotesquerie. It was about a month into the charade. Marcus, frustrated by my continued refusal to invest in his AI fantasy, or fund a dubious clinic, staged a grand gesture. He arrived with his 2 young children, in tow children, and I barely knew, who looked uncomfortable and out of place in the formal manner. He herded them into the library, where I was resting. "Kids," Marcus announced, his voice thick with false emotion. "Grandpa Brian is very sick. He needs our love and support." He nudged the older one, a boy of about 10. "Tell Grandpa what you made for him." The boy, looking mortified, thrust forward a clumsily folded piece of construction paper. On it, in crayon, was a stick figure under a yellow sun, with the words "Get well soon, Grandpa." The sentiment was likely his teacher's suggestion. Marcus beamed. "See, Uncle Brian, the kids are praying for you. They need their grandpa." He put a heavy hand on the boy's shoulder. "We all do. That's why we have to fight. For them." He gestured expansively, encompassing the room, the manor, the fortune. "Think of their future." The manipulation was so blatant, so cynical, using innocent children as emotional blackmail to pry open my wallet, that I felt physically ill. I forced a weak smile, thanked the bewildered-looking children, and Martha swiftly ushered them out for cookies in the kitchen. Marcus lingered, his expression expectant, almost triumphant, as if the childish card was a trump play. I closed my eyes, feigning exhaustion, the taste of bile in my throat. That moment, more than any other, hardened my resolve. The revenge wouldn't just be financial. It needed to be a reckoning. The cracks in their facades started to show as the months wore on, and I didn't dramatically decline according to their imagined schedule. Sarah's efficiency began to fray into impatience. "Dad, we really need to finalize the power of attorney," she pressed one afternoon, her voice sharper than usual. "Dr. Thorne mentioned potential cognitive decline as a possibility. We need to be prepared." The subtext screamed, "Before you lose your marbles and do something stupid with the money." Robert's suggestions became less subtle, more insistent. He started bringing draft documents for my review. 1. Outlining a substantial advance on Sarah's inheritance for estate planning purposes, was particularly brazen. "It simplifies things immensely, Brian. Reduces friction later." Friction meaning any potential for me leaving money to anyone else. Marcus grew increasingly desperate and resentful. The miracle cures dried up, replaced by barely concealed frustration. "You're just giving up, Uncle Brian," he accused during one visit, his charm evaporating. "Think of the opportunities slipping away. That AI deal is closing. I need that capital now. If you won't fight for yourself, fight for the family's future." His voice cracked, revealing the raw panic beneath. His house of cards was trembling. David simply faded further. His visits became even rarer. When I asked Martha, she reported he spent most days surfing or brooding in the gatehouse, fielding calls from what sounded like creditors. His indifference had curdled into a kind of passive-aggressive withdrawal. Only Eleanor remained constant. Her quiet afternoons were my sanctuary. One day, she brought a photo album pictures of Evelyn and me in our younger days, laughing on a beach, posing awkwardly with a newborn Sarah. We paged through it slowly. She pointed to a picture of me, holding a toddler David on my shoulders. "He adores you, Brian," she said softly. Before everything got complicated, there was no judgment in her voice, just a profound sadness for what had been lost. That simple moment, sharing a memory untainted by greed, was worth all the acting, all the bitterness. It reaffirmed why I was doing this. Genuine connection did exist. It was just tragically rare. Martha was my silent sentinel. One evening, after a particularly grueling day with Marcus and Robert tag-teaming me about finances, she brought my dinner tray. As she set it down, her hand briefly touched mine. A small, deliberate gesture of solidarity. "They're like vultures, Mr. Eldridge," she murmured, her voice low and fierce. "Circling. It's disgraceful." Then she straightened, the perfect servant once more. But that touch, those quiet words, were a lifeline. They reminded me I wasn't alone in seeing the truth. The terminal test was revealing its results in stark, brutal detail. Sarah and Robert, controlled greed, masked by duty. Marcus and Cynthia, rapacious, unvarnished avarice. David, profound, selfish indifference. Eleanor, unconditional, quiet love. Martha, unwavering loyalty and fierce protectiveness. The ledger was clear. The sentence was being written in my mind, line by damning line. The public exposure would be their purgatory, the inheritance, their reward, or their eternal rebuke. The clock was ticking down, not to my death, but to their judgment day. The performance was nearing its final, devastating act. My revenge would be colder and more satisfying than any Scotch he'd ever tasted. Let them circle. Their feast would turn to ashes.